opportunity to talk about this. But sorry, it's an emotional topic. When we were looking for issues to discuss, we wanted to really focus on regional things, but this issue, when it came up, we recognized the importance of creating a platform for it because it impacts the entire state. There's not a community in New Mexico that is not impacted by domestic violence. And so we're grateful that we have this opportunity to present this. And I'm not going to take up a lot of time talking about this issue because I want the experts to have a chance to talk about it. I do just want to quickly say thank you to PNM for sponsoring this platform and allowing us to bring all of these important issues to all New Mexicans and creating a public platform. And of course, I want to thank my co-host, the Santa Fe Chamber and the New Mexico Chamber. As you know, we're going to have this session with the New Mexico Coalition Against Domestic Violence and the Lieutenant Governor. And then we'll be having a session with all three education secretaries. And then this afternoon, right after lunch, our final session today will be with the Attorney General talking about human trafficking. So we have some deep topics today, but important topics. And I am, again, so grateful that we get to present this. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to our panelists. Teresa, I will turn it over to you and let you do all the introductions and talk about the important work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We are really excited to have you all with us today to celebrate Domestic Violence Day at the Roundhouse, as well as congratulate our community heroes who are our programs across the state of New Mexico. We have amazing guests today that will be honoring them. I wanted just to take a moment really quickly to go through our who is on our staff, on the screen, should I say, and introduce our staff. My name is Teresa Garcia. I am the Director of Communications and Training. We also have Gwen Cadis, who is our Director of Policy. Rachel Cox, if you want to wave hello, is our Chief Program Officer, and of course, our Executive Director, Pam Wiseman. We also have our special guest, Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales. We're so excited to have him on and join us today, as well as Senator Antoinette Sedillo Lopez. And so with that being said, we're going to have Lieutenant Governor come on here, and I will now turn it over to you, Pam. Please interact with us in the chat and via Facebook. We will be sharing it here shortly. If you want to take a moment to also congratulate our programs, that would be fantastic. They have been absolutely resilient this year through a global pandemic and supporting survivors and their families and providing resources and really going above and beyond. And so with that being said, Pam, I will turn it over to you to introduce our Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Terry. I'm a little blurry, but that's probably a good thing. I don't know if you all can see that because I look better when there's a little bit of blurriness. I'd like to spend a couple of minutes. I have a few things I'd like to say before I introduce the Lieutenant Governor. Will that work out for everyone? Yes, it will. Okay. All right, thank you. So the first thing I guess I want to say is that the New Mexico Coalition, there's the Lieutenant Governor, Against Domestic Violence is a 501c3. We are a New Mexico nonprofit, and we support the work of about 30 domestic violence providers all around New Mexico. We have lots of other members too that are very diverse, from legal aid to the Little Horse Whisperer, which is a animal therapy group. We have the Transgender Resource Center. We have churches. We have law enforcement. So there are a lot of organizations and groups that want to be a part of this work across the state, and we want to be a part of what they do. I also want to just take a minute to thank Terry Garcia for her outreach efforts and for bringing all these people into the fold. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our providers, what they did, what they faced, how they coped, and how they served during the pandemic. But And then I'm going to introduce to you the Lieutenant Governor, who we're all here to listen to anyhow. But the first question I just want to bring up is that people often ask, is domestic violence worse during the pandemic? And I just wanted to say a very quick few words about that. The fact is that some groups have been more seriously affected by the pandemic than have others. And victims of domestic violence are certainly one of those groups who've had lots of barriers. Some victims were, of course, unable to work. They might have been trapped at home. They had financial difficulties. They were afraid to leave because they had to make decisions about, am I safer at home or safer out in the world, exposing myself and my children to COVID. Some of them who were able to leave found their stimulus checks had been taken, and there was a lot of financial difficulties. And in some places, people told us that the violence against victims was more severe. That was anecdotal, but we did hear that. And in other areas, crisis calls went up drastically. And so there's no way of knowing what the numbers really were, but we know they were way too high, and they're always way too high. And that leads me to what our domestic violence providers, the 30 of them across New Mexico, did. And just quickly, I want to note that they found safe housing for victims of domestic violence. Shelters weren't probably always safe anymore, but they found places for people to be. And they did it in a way that was comparable to and in the same numbers almost as the year before. There was a 13% decrease, according to CYFD, in the number of people that found safe housing. That's amazing during a pandemic. In terms of all their other services, the counseling and services to people who commit violence, those services, they found a way to do that also. And they served as many people as they did before. And in some cases, those services even increased. And then last, they had, unlike other states, they had very few outbreaks. They were very careful and responsible. As the pandemic sort of went on, they had a few more, but they were quickly resolved. And so our programs managed to keep their staff safe, their clients safe, and their communities safe. They kept them safe from violence, and they kept them safe from the virus. So that is the reason why we are honoring them as community heroes this year. Next year, we'll have, like previous years, we will be looking to people who are just serving in our communities. So maybe some of the people who are listening today will be community heroes. Terry Garcia was herself a community hero a couple of years before she came to work for the coalition. So with that, it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce to you the Lieutenant Governor, Howie Morales. The Lieutenant Governor has always been a champion for domestic violence. And I want to give just a recent example of something that he did that I think really says it all. And while we were putting together care packages for all of our providers, and we had put that on Facebook, the Lieutenant Governor saw that and reached out to us to ask what he could do to help. And what he did was to handwrite letters to all of the providers across the state. And I just want to say that that, to me, is an incredible thing to do, and it's not something that you would see very often. And it shows you what kind of a person we have as Lieutenant Governor and what kind of leader he has been. So we are very grateful for his presence here today. And with that, I'm going to just turn it over to the Lieutenant Governor. Thank you so much for being here.
Pam, thank you for that wonderful introduction. So good to be here. Terry, thank you for reaching out and just including me in such a wonderful program. And I just want to say thank you to PNM and all the sponsors of this virtual Roundhouse New Mexico. This is the second time that I've appeared on it. And I'm so grateful because even though that we can't be together, doesn't mean that we can't stand together. And that's what we're doing here, is stand in support of issues and programs that are so important to us. And for me, this is something that is extremely personal to me because I think that in one way or another, each of us have been impacted through domestic violence and impacted of the harmful effects. And for me, I saw it personally as a high school teacher. And I knew the times when families struggled and those students struggled. It didn't matter what was in that math book, or it didn't matter what the social studies lesson was of that day. Because if there was chaos at the home, if there was disruption and there was violence, that is what took precedence over the learning of that day. So that's why it's so important as we come in today. And when we talk about the issues with COVID, we don't really know the impacts that we're going to see and have yet to see of many of these areas that for whatever reason may not be coming to the forefront as they would have had there not been a pandemic. But today, so many women in New Mexico have to flee domestic violence and abuse. Many having children with them and become homeless. And I know this personally because I personally have reached out with cases where they've come to our office asking for support and needing assistance. And you've been there to do that. But we also know that nobody should ever have to choose between safety and shelter. And the link between violence and homelessness is undeniable, but it's not unbreakable. And as I share the stories that each of us can relate to and share the experiences that we've all seen on a personal level, I'm reminded of Sheila Wellstone, who was a champion for ending domestic violence. And Sheila said that we really have to look at the values that guide us. We have to work toward an ethic and the ethic that respects every individual to be physically and emotionally safe. Because no one, regardless of age, color, gender, background, and any other factor, deserves to be physically or emotionally unsafe. In a just society, we pledge to act together to ensure that each individual is safe from harm. In a just society. And that's exactly the work that each one of you does on a daily basis. And when we talk about frontline workers and essential workers, the work that each one of you does at the local community level is so impactful and needs to be heard at the state level to ensure that we continue to provide those support and resources necessary for success. I'm glad to be on this virtual Roundhouse to join champions like Senators Antoinette Sedillo Lopez and Senators Linda Lopez and many others who for years have advocated to make sure that we're going to have safety and shelter. And for me as an educator, to recognize that if we want true academic achievement, that we have to recognize that it's taken into account the well-being, mentally, physically, socially, emotionally, and making sure that spiritual aspect is combined in all that we do. So I'm grateful to be part of this panel. I'm grateful to be part of this program. And just know that I look forward to seeing all the purple at the Roundhouse next year. But I know the work will continue. And thank you for your continued advocacy, for being a voice for those who may not have a voice. God bless.
Thank you. Terry?
Thank you so much. I wish that we were all in the Roundhouse right now, wearing purple and having our awards and giving those awards and recognizing our programs. And I really do want to say thank you as well, because your office reached out to us and how you can take part on our care packages for our programs. We really wanted to make them feel honored and recognized with all of the work that they've done. During a global pandemic and providing resources, finding housing, just as our director stated before, we're here. They definitely went above and beyond. Pam did have a question that she wanted to ask you, and then we'll go into some other questions that we have for you today, if that's okay, Lieutenant Governor.
Absolutely. Thank you, Terry.
Sure.
Yes, thank you, Lieutenant Governor. I guess the question I have is, why domestic violence? If you feel comfortable answering this, why is domestic violence an important issue for you? And or what do you think New Mexico can do to really address the problem of domestic violence?
Yeah, thank you. And I think I shared in my opening comments some of those areas why I felt it was so important when we talk about economic development, jobs, the
Yep.
economy, education. It all ties in together to the quality of life. And so the quality of life really does start at the home and with the family. And when we see the impacts that are taking place, especially the generational impacts, trying to break that cycle, it's extremely important that we continue to keep at the forefront the impacts, the harmful effects, but also the opportunities for solutions. And so, what we can do is to have exactly like this discussions, to keep these discussions going, to make sure that we recognize and we don't let it go where it's unheard of or that it's not spoken of. Because all too often, that is what took place with domestic violence. It was the unspoken issues, the unspoken acts that people just didn't want to talk about outside the family home. But because of great advocacy of people like you and people on this call, we know that how important it is to continue those discussions. And it's also important that we continue to recognize, as you do, all of those people at the local level, at the community levels who are on the ground level, who see the families that come through their doors, who go out there and try to provide the resources and to make sure that they know that they're valued and to make sure that they know that their work is making an impact. And so as you continue to honor and to recognize people across the state of New Mexico, that's why it's so important that I'm a part of that, to make sure that they know from the state house to your house that we're going to have that connection.
Thank you so much. I'm also hoping that I don't know if she's on. I think she was hoping to be on, Rachel Sierra from El Refugio in Silver City. And I know that she might have had something that she would like to say if she is on. Would she be able to do that in the chat? No.
She is on. She is actually in the chat, and she said good morning to us, and so we are really happy to have her here. So thank you for joining us today, Rachel. I had another question for you, Lieutenant Governor. What do you think New Mexico can do better to address DV as a problem here?
Yeah, I think we've made great strides in the state. And I think that when you look and see the improvements, and you can always talk about resources, and resources are definitely helpful. When you have a budget that's created, it really is a moral document of what is important to us. And when we talk about family values, it's important to recognize that all families are valued and to make sure that we continue these programs that are so important. But we also recognize that the importance of extending out even into the school settings to make sure that when we're working, that we understand that there's counselors, psychologists, other type of wraparound services that are so helpful, not only in the school setting, but in the community setting, the business setting, because it impacts us all. So I do think that there's a lot more that we can do and we will do. And what I do see is that there's going to be some impacts that come out of COVID that we may have not realized. And because of that, I think that we're going to have to recognize that there's going to have to be a shift. And there's going to have to be an approach that isn't just business as usual, but an approach to see how we can be creative and how we can meet the needs of people across the state. Maybe it's through technology. Maybe it's the ability to have that direct access. And maybe it's that ability to make sure that we can have that person-to-person contact. So I look forward at the possibilities and the opportunities that COVID is going to present us, even though it does present us with some challenges that we're concerned about.
Thank you for answering that. During COVID, they told everybody to stay home, right? And it's like home is supposed to be a safe place. But for most, it is not a safe place because you're with your abuser or the offender, and it becomes really difficult on whether staying or leaving or staying safe and not, coming in contact with COVID-19. So we will see what happens, once we get back to normal, right? Hopefully in going back to school in August, but it's definitely been a tough time. But again, just a shout out to our programs because they, again, have just done everything in their power to support survivors during this time. And I did want to point out that Rachel Sierra did want to say thank you to the Lieutenant Governor for his continued support and the response to domestic violence. We are proud to have our Lieutenant Governor be one of our own. They definitely depend on your support. So thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Good morning, Lieutenant Governor. We're really grateful to have you here, and thank you for all of your comments so far. I really appreciate this theme that I think that's emerging from this conversation, that when we think about what New Mexico and what our communities need, that there's just not a singular issue. I think we've seen that, education has become a place where people are also getting their food now, right? We've had food distribution during COVID. And I think for our domestic violence agencies, they're realizing that there's not, that their needs for their survivors that they're working with are not separate from how they need to be working with schools, how we need to be working with state and local government, everything. It's just one long thread, that's kind of knitted together, and I think we really have seen in New Mexico these ways that our programs came together during this time. It's nothing like a situation like this global pandemic to see the resiliency in our communities, to see the resiliency in our leadership. And kind of like what Pam was saying, these are easy issues to turn away from. So when we have someone in your position willing to really turn towards these issues, it just means that we as a state can get really real about what we're going to do about this. So thank you so much for everything that you've offered here today, for your support for our programs, which I know really meant a lot, and for all of the work for our programs. There's a lot of shout outs and connections happening. So much of this work can be doom and gloom, and it's exciting. Kind of like also, Terry, what you were saying in the beginning, the Roundhouse is always a day where we get to lift this work up, and really take it out of the shadows and into what some of the change that needs to happen at a state level. So it's wonderful to be here and to still feel some of that excitement happening. So thanks for this opportunity to feel like it's all still moving forward.
It sort of makes me think, Lieutenant Governor, when you were mentioning what COVID has done, I think one of the things it's done is to alert us all to what it's like to not feel safe, to just perennially not feel safe, right? So victims of domestic violence and their children feel unsafe a lot. And most of us just didn't really have that experience, right? There might be times when we felt unsafe, but basically, we just went about our lives. And now, right, we understand what it's like to have a threat and to not know what might happen or when or what that would mean for you. And a lot of people have been really traumatized by that, right? And I think it just helps us to understand better what that's like and the kinds of effects it's going to have for all of us who went through this pandemic. It will be a while before we recover, just like it's often a long time for victims of domestic violence to recover. So we do know that when communities are able to say, you know what, this is not okay for us, and we don't want violence here, that's when domestic violence is lessened. That's really what it takes, but sometimes it's hard for people to understand it. If they haven't been through it, they think, well, maybe she should have left, or what, they don't have maybe as great an understanding, but now I think they do. And I hope that this horrible pandemic, at least I hope that it is the first step towards having some sort of empathy and understanding about how important it is to feel safe and what we can all do as a community to make that happen for more people. And your being here today is a part of that. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to just give a lot of thanks to our public education department and the work that they're doing in the Community Schools Initiative, which the community schools should be part of the work that you do as well, because that is so important. And we recognize that even though ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, have been around for decades, I think now the recognition of the importance of making sure that we can address those is so important, that you work hand in hand with all of those programs, because you're a part of that. And that's exactly right. COVID gives us an opportunity to rethink how we can do things. COVID gives us an opportunity of how we can make life better for people across the state. And, just in closing, I used to be a baseball coach, and I loved a lot of the metaphors that came out of being a baseball coach. And the whole goal of baseball is to cross home plate, because home meant mission accomplished, triumph, safety. And as we look and see how we can have that be a reality for every New Mexican family, that we can recognize how important and powerful home is. And that's why you have my continued support and will always have my continued support to make sure that we can have what that American dream is for a home that's going to be safe and secure for all people.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Howie. We also want to be very respectful of your time, but we are so honored and grateful to have you on today, and all the support that you've given us at the Coalition as well as our programs. And so thank you for being here. I cannot say it enough. And thank you for being a part of our care packages. That really made a huge impact and difference for our programs and for reaching out. And so again, thank you so much for being here today.
And
thank you as well.
Yeah. Terry, shall we introduce Gwen? I don't know if the Lieutenant Governor will be able to stay, but we want to say a little bit about legislation.
Yeah, he can definitely stay on. Gwen is already on the screen, so it works out perfectly. We definitely wanted to bring in some policy updates for those of us watching on Facebook or here on this platform. And so Gwen, she is our Director of Policy. If you can give us the updates.
Sure. Hello, everybody. Good morning. I just want to tell you a little bit about what the Coalition does kind of behind the scenes. Throughout the year, we work on policy and legislation to try to create and improve things for survivors, things that affect their safety and well-being. So we work in collaboration with a lot of other allies, with other organizations, with legislators, and we initiate and respond to issues that affect the concerns and needs of our programs and of survivors of domestic violence. So some of the ways we do that is educating lawmakers and key stakeholders about concerns and needs of victims. And we monitor legislation for potential unintended consequences of how laws may affect victims of domestic violence. And another thing that is really important during the legislative session is that we work with lawmakers to look for ways that we can improve the safety and well-being of victims of domestic violence in this state. So this legislative session, we're working on several bills, and I'll update you on those. We are working with Representative Deborah Armstrong on House Bill 204. And what we are trying to do with that is to remove the required 2-week publication when somebody changes their name. And there are several reasons why we want to accomplish this. One thing is that victims of domestic violence may be trying to escape an abuser, and so they would not want their name changed to be publicized in their community. Because that would alert the abuser. So that is one of the reasons. But we also want to reduce the financial burden. Changing your name in court, you have to petition the court, you have to pay court fees. So that is really sometimes beyond the reach of people, and especially victims of domestic violence. So really that publication in the paper, we want to try to reduce that cost. Another thing that affects is when you go to get a real ID, the requirements say that you need four different documents, but your name has to be the same on all those documents. I don't know about you, but I have a couple of different versions of my name. And so what you need to do is you need to do a name change to get that real ID. And so the financial burden can be hefty. So we are working on that. We are also working with Senator Linda Lopez on Senate Bill 92, and that is to protect the confidential location of domestic violence victims who may have been reported as missing, but may actually be trying to escape from an abuser. That bill is something that will enhance the safety and well-being of survivors so that they can say that they don't want their location reported to someone. Right now, as the statute stands, law enforcement is required to notify a family member or household member, and we really want to put some protections in there for domestic violence victims. We're also working on a bill with Senator Antoinette Sedillo Lopez, and that has to do with lease protections for domestic violence victims. When a survivor is abused and needs to leave an apartment where there's a lease that goes on for another 6 months, say, to allow that victim to move to escape the abuser without penalties. Because oftentimes when you end a lease, you have to pay penalties. So that's another thing that we're working on. And Senator Antoinette Sedillo Lopez, I think, will be here to talk about that herself, so I won't go into that very much. We're also working on legislation that affects, we're supporting legislation that affects victims' ability to be able to say for themselves whether they want to engage in a pretrial interview. New Mexico is one of the states that, one of 3 states that requires testimony in pretrial services. So we're trying to work on that because the victim is questioned over and over and over and just becomes very traumatized. They will then have to participate in the trial in the courtroom, but we're at least trying to reduce that traumatization. That is one of the things we're working on. Another thing that we're working on is House Bill 36, which is allowing for remote testimony for child witnesses and incapacitated adults in court hearings. We feel that's really important too, because again, though the interviews are just over and over again, the testimony, especially having to testify in open court in front of somebody who abused you, which may actually be a parent. That is so difficult. Imagine a 4-year-old in an open courtroom having to do that. So we're trying to look at other ways to reduce the traumatization effect on the child. So other things that we're working on, we collaborate with other organizations. We support bills that will affect, for example, Native American women, and we work with the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women on those bills. So there's a lot going on right now. The legislative session is halfway over, but there is a lot of work to do going forward. So thank you. Pam?
Pam, I think you're muted.
Terribly sorry. Are there any questions in the chat, Terry, that we can address?
So Amy McCarthy did ask what's the name of the bill again. So not sure which one she was referring to, if you can maybe place it in the chat. But she would definitely want to know how to help to advocate for these wonderful legislative proposals through the virtual office hours, or how they can maybe get a hold of their senators and representatives.
Yes, that's wonderful. Yes, to support these bills, you can go to the legislative website and find your legislator, and then depending upon whether it's a House bill or a Senate bill, you can find your representative or find your senator and email them or call them. They really do appreciate hearing from people, whether this is something that people support or don't support. That's a very important process for them. So yes, I highly encourage people, and whatever the bill is, we can absolutely give you some information on that if you'd like.
Thank you. Anything else, Terry, in the chat?
No, it doesn't look like there is anything in the chat, but I see that Rachel is unmuted.
I was just, Gwen, thank you for all your work, adjusting to this, online session this year. It's been, I think, for everyone, going into this session, for programs, this is typically when we gather, when we get to kind of come together for these advocacy efforts. And so it's wonderful to kind of see that that things have shifted and we're shifting with it. When you were talking about the different policy efforts that we're engaged with this year, you really hear how often sometimes laws get made, and then a lot of our policy work can be around including how specifically that might impact a survivor of domestic violence and their family. That sometimes there are these unintended consequences of other bills where we have to say, wait, in this situation, this person's privacy, their sense of safety is impacted by this law that was well intended, but we need to advocate for that. And so I'm excited about our initiatives this year because enhancing safety and privacy for survivors when it's needed. And then also the work in the criminal justice system, we want that process when it can be trauma informed to really be able to support survivors and their families, and especially young children who might have already told the story once, and how much bravery and courage that takes for a family to come through that, and how deserving they are to start their healing journey immediately and not get so wrapped up in the criminal justice system, which can feel, really re-traumatizing the way you were talking about that. And so, often these policy initiatives have a first year, where things are introduced, the issues with current law is sort of named, and then we keep working on it. And so I'm excited, for this year's initiatives or past year's initiatives to just kind of keep building on these issues of making sure that our system across the board, the criminal justice system, how people are able to, and just something like get your driver's license should not be a barrier, because of your experience of violence. And so hopefully we'll see some really positive outcomes this year. And if not this year, that ongoing continued work that, our programs are a part of, the way that they support everyone. So it's exciting.
Right. And when we think,
I'm sorry. I was going to say, thank you, Rachel. Before Antoinette arrives, I want to say something about one of the things that she did for us and why that matters. Antoinette sponsored, Senator Sedillo Lopez sponsored a memorial asking our group to study whether a coordinated community response is feasible in New Mexico. And so some of you probably have no idea what a coordinated community response is or why that matters. But basically the point is that in order for us to really be successful in doing something about domestic violence, it takes more than just the really wonderful efforts of our providers. That is key, but it's not the only thing. And there's a little story which I have told before, and I love the story, and I'll tell it forever until I'm really older. That I think explains the kind of work that we're trying to do, that our providers are trying to do, that Senator Lopez was trying to do with creating some coordination. And this, the story has a name. It's called The Healthy Forest. And it goes like this. It's very quick. There once was a forest full of beautiful trees. And one day, some of them started to get sick. And so the sick trees went to the rehab where they got fertilizer and sunshine, and they recovered, and they went back to the forest and put their roots back into the soil, and they got sick again. And so what happened? What happened was that even though the trees themselves were cured or helped, the soil in which they were growing was diseased. And what that means is that the work of domestic violence is not just helping the trees, not just helping individuals to be better, whether we're helping offenders or whether we're helping victims. It's also cleaning the soil. And that means, as the Lieutenant Governor said, providing education and information so that people understand what violence really is about, and creating systems, whether it's the criminal justice system or whatever else, that really work, right? And that create environments where domestic violence is less likely. And I think that the Senate Memorial to help our coalition study how that could happen is one of the things we're really thankful to the senator for having done. I don't know if she'll mention it, but that's what we're hoping. Thank you.
And I just wanted to give a little bit of information as we wait for Senator Antoinette Sedillo Lopez to log on. If you have not yet attended the committees, it is also fairly easy to do that. You can go to nmlegis.gov. You can search for the bill under legislation. You can put the number in there and the information, whether it's a bill, and if it's in the House or the Senate. And then it'll give you some information for that. But you can also head to webcasts on that site, and you'll be able to join and see all of the numerous committee hearings that you all have access to, and you can watch and get more information and learn about the bills and what they're about. Gwen, if you want to give some more information.
Yes, I would like to really encourage people to read up on the bills, and then there is a way to provide public comments, which is another thing that's really important to legislators. So when they're hearing a bill in one of the committees, and there are House committees and there are Senate committees, you can raise your hand and you will be put into a queue where you will there will be public comments for and against the bill and why people are for or against that bill. So I really encourage public participation. It's a little, it's kind of easier this year because you can do it from home, but it's also, more difficult for people that don't have access to the internet and would normally maybe go to Santa Fe because they're so interested in a bill. But I would encourage everybody to do that. And there are schedules that the committees put out so that you know what bill's being heard.
While we're looking for ways to stay connected during this time, I also really want to make sure for anyone who's participating who's also not familiar with your local program, just to shift to that for a second in ways that we can really, we want to promote all the online participation with any of the legislative pieces possible. And today we're also really here honoring our programs as community heroes this year. And you can visit www.nmcadv.org, and you'll be able to navigate to your local program there. And if you're not already connected with ways you can support them, if it's about this year, volunteering might look a little different than it has at our local organizations than before. But I think everyone's getting creative right now, and so reaching out and seeing how you might be able to support their local efforts. And when possible, local programs are always going to benefit from time and money. So if anyone out there has the ways to offer that to your local program, they will always benefit from that. So you can either look up, your community's name in domestic violence. Frequently, the local program will pop up that way, or you can visit the New Mexico Coalition Against Domestic Violence's webpage to get connected that way as well. Going off of the Lieutenant Governor's comments from earlier, this really does all take a village, and it takes us taking on the issues of our neighbors, not just the issues in our own homes. And New Mexico is really good at doing that. I think we've seen that this year, and our programs are really good at doing that. And so they can be a wonderful way. We were meeting with a public health doctor who was giving us some information on COVID, and we asked him how do you get through these times feeling positive? It's a lot of bad news these days in the news. And he said, do something helpful. And I think for anyone, listening, if anyone's feeling disconnected or isolated, doing something helpful is a great way to get started, and engaging with our programs locally can be a great way to do that. So you can find them online easily.
Yes, absolutely. Please head to our website. And I just have to put the plug in. If you have not yet followed us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, please follow us. We all have this. It's the same tag for every single social media platform, NMCADV. We have tons of information that we share that you can find on our website, as Rachel stated before. But we also share a lot of our advocacy cafes where we highlight community members, community organizations, and trainings that are open and free to the public. We also have other trainings that we have and that we provide for our advocates across the state of New Mexico. But again, those are also open to the public. If you will all be interested, if you would be interested in attending, you are more than welcome to. Some of them we do share on Facebook, as we are doing today. And shout out to those attending our Facebook Live right now for this event. Eliza Sultan, it is so nice to see you. We have other advocates on there. Thank you all for tuning in. And like I mentioned before, please place in your comments or your questions in the chat and share, but follow, like, and share on our Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and you can also head to our YouTube channel where we place all of our recordings on there, so you all can take a look at what we have done this year. We have gone above and beyond as well with providing trainings for our advocates and our member programs that again is also open to the public. So if you would like to learn about what we do at the coalition, or maybe learn about how to obtain a restraining order, or even information about our member programs. We do have membership highlights on there. So if you would like to get to know them, that is the best place to go. And please reach out to your local organization, just as Rachel mentioned, if maybe they might need some support, but it's always nice to just work with them. And maybe if you would like to reach out to them to maybe possibly do a training for your organization, or get to know them as well, please reach out to them. As Rachel stated, go to our website, to our programs. We do have principal members and organizational members as well. And thank you, Britta. As she stated in the chat, strongly suggest an MCADV YouTube channel. We have a broad spectrum of trainings there that we have done this past year. So we're really excited to always share those with you. And so please join us. Oh, we also have a listserv. Almost forgot about the listserv. You can also join the listserv to get all of our announcements with trainings and events and announcements that we have. We do have an announcement coming up March 1st. So I'll just give you a little teaser there, but keep an eye on our Facebook page for that. And again, if you have any questions or concerns, please reach out to us.
You know, it's really.
Would it be all right if we also added the national hotline number so that people have that? And that number is 800-799-7233. And they can direct you to the nearest program in your area. I also just want to say that sometimes we know that during session it's really difficult to get away, and so we're hoping that Antoinette, Senator Lopez, will be able to join us. It's possible that she will not, but we do want to make sure to thank her for having supported domestic violence for so many years. I'm going to introduce her, even though she's not here yet, just so that we have a chance to acquaint you all with her. She was on the board for many years in LASE, and then she became the director there. She was also on the board of our organization, NMCADV, and then she was a policy director until she became the senator. And of course, now she's still a senator, but she's sponsored legislation, as Gwen mentioned, and she has been really at the forefront, I think, of domestic violence. And so we just want to give her a shout out in the event that we don't get a chance to talk with her today. So thank you, Senator Lopez, Senator Sedillo Lopez.
And she is coming on in a couple of minutes. She's logging into the support booth, so we will have her on. She has been an amazing person to work with in the past, as well as highlighting our community heroes at the Roundhouse. So definitely thank you to Senator Antoinette Sedillo Lopez for that.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear she's getting on. Yes.
While we're waiting, as we're coming up into sort of the anniversary of when everybody kind of went home from work, some of just the innovations from our programs really briefly to share with that could be so helpful for people who aren't familiar with their local program. We've had programs around the state, who did things like get Wi-Fi in their parking lot so people could access, the internet for services when they needed to. We've had people who started their own, what you might call hotline for people who are causing harm, to reach out when things were escalating and that they could, be able to get help ahead of time. All of our services went virtual. People became Zoom experts. They became COVID-19 experts. We have executive directors who, they are the go-to person when we need resources for how to find PPE or, what is the latest research, around vaccines. They've really just become such a resource for survivors and their communities. People finding ways to get news and information about their services to families when other routes, the typical routes they would use, aren't there. So starting text lines that weren't there prior to COVID. I can't remember, Pam, if it was you or the Lieutenant Governor, or was kind of both in the conversation, that there have been innovations over this past year that we will keep, the way that while services shifted, so many of our programs actually deepened their reach into the community to be working with survivors in very different ways. There were advocates doing meal delivery to hotels across the state, just doing everything they could to make sure that survivors and their family, and then also even people who are causing harm, have those needs met, because we know certain stressors certainly don't cause domestic violence, but we know that when those stressors go up in the home, that we're going to see, some of that show up. And so really trying to get at how can we decrease the overall stress for these families, our children's capacity building projects, trying to get very innovative to continue their work with children. I think so many people were worried that without them being in the schools, that there just weren't any eyes on these kids and their families, and, very concerned for that. So continuing services in parking lots or building sheds, ventilated sheds for services. I mean, there's just been so many amazing initiatives. It wasn't whether or not they were going to, it was how they were going to, and they really figured that out. And so it's an inspiration to get to know the work that's happening at our DV agencies across the state, and it inspires us every day. And it's why I think, folks like the Lieutenant Governor and Senator Sedillo Lopez are wanting to take their time to be with us today, because they know how critical this work is. It's amazing to see the creativity out of crisis. Sometimes I think there's a paralysis that can set in. People feel stuck, but we've really seen some energized, creative programming. It's very exciting.
Absolutely. And just, I don't think we actually even gave a background of what the New Mexico Coalition Against Domestic Violence does. And so maybe, Pam, if you would like to give a little background, or I can do it, it's totally fine.
Sure. I think I said a few things earlier when we first started, but basically, the New Mexico Coalition Against Domestic Violence, known as NMCADV, provides support and assistance, and hopefully sometimes a voice for domestic violence programs across the state. There are 30 of them and lots of members. As I said, thanks to Terry Garcia, whose outreach has been bringing more and more people into the fold. So we're getting, lots more people, very diverse groups who are really interested in domestic violence and making things better for all of us in the state. We do the legislative and policy work, as you heard from Gwyn already. And we also spend a lot of our time finding ways to connect our programs with each other and with other groups. So that we help them to not feel alone. Sometimes this work can be really hard and isolating. COVID has made it more so. And so we look for ways to help people see that the things that they're experiencing are not theirs alone, and that others have the same issues. So that's really what the coalition does, and more. And hopefully you'll go to our website and see what that is. So I'm thinking that it's not clear whether we'll be able to get Senator Sedillo Lopez. And I don't know. I don't think we want to keep anyone much longer.
Say that she's in. Sorry.
Oh, she's in.
Yes.
Oh, she's in. Okay.
Yes.
Boy, the second time I've said that, and both times. Okay, so do we have the senator with us now then?
Yes.
So we have to, does one of us need to? No, she's not in.
I don't think she's in yet.
She
We might need to walk up and say.
She thinks she's in. Let me get something here.
Okay, all right. So we're all getting acquainted with online meetings, right? And it's,
It's just, that's been like a process, right, for all of us. First it was Zoom, how to learn Zoom, and going from in person to online has definitely been a learning curve for a lot of people. But actually at the end, it's kind of turning into like an easier platform, right, to attend all of our trainings, all of our events instead of traveling and all of that. But I did want to also piggyback on Pam's statement about what NMCADV does. We are a membership program. And, if anybody out there is listening and would like to become a member, you can definitely apply to become a member. You can contact me directly at terry@nmcadv.org. The trainings that we do offer, I touched a little bit on that earlier, but we do offer batterer intervention program trainings for our trainings across the state, for our programs across the state of New Mexico. We also have, the core advocacy training for our programs, where if you are a new advocate, you would take that training to be ready to go. There's a lot of background information. We have also revamped it and have collaborated with our organizations here, the Coalition to Stop Violence Against Native Women. We have the New Mexico Sexual Assault Programs as well, the Transgender Resource Center, Enlace Comunitario, which supports our Latin immigrant community here in Albuquerque. And we also have a children's program that we address during that training. All of this is absolutely informational to support our advocates to understand the different communities that domestic violence affects, as it's obviously not something that it only affects one person. It affects everybody in one form or another. And so again, these are open to the public as well. And if you want to learn more about that, you can also email me as well. But we would be really excited for you all to become part of the coalition or interact with us more as we go on through this virtual setting. And hopefully once we get back into what is our norm, right, and have in-person meetings, we will be able to have lunch and have these events together. And especially in the Roundhouse, our norm is definitely to just honor our programs or our community heroes, whoever they may be. But this year, it is definitely our programs for their resilience throughout COVID-19 and this global pandemic. But we would have an amazing event at the Roundhouse, at the Rotunda. And then afterwards, we would have, lunch together and just celebrate them. So we hope to hopefully go back to that maybe next year, who knows? But we definitely look forward to meeting you all and having you all and make it a fantastic event next year. Fortunately, right now it's virtual, but this is fantastic in itself because we can reach so many people virtually through Facebook, through YouTube, in a way that we have never done before. And so we are absolutely grateful to the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce, the Santa Fe Chamber of Commerce, and as well as the New Mexico Hospitality Association for all of their support in helping us make this program today possible. I know that Antoinette Sedillo Lopez is supposed to be logging on. She is in the process of doing so, but please, if you have any questions at all for us as staff here, please place them in the chat, or you can also join us via Facebook, which I am keeping an eye on. And so it looks like we do have a question in from Teresa Armendariz, who is she has a new title, our program development specialist. Is that correct?
Program support specialist. Yep.
Program support specialist. What can someone do in order to keep up to date on what NMCADV is doing year round? Like I mentioned before, we do have our listserv. You can log on and register for that. So you will get weekly emails from myself with information on trainings as well as events that we have going on. You can also head to our website where we do have a slider that will show you things that are coming up. One thing to attend that you can attend every single month is our Advocacy Cafe. It's every third Tuesday of the month from 11 to 12:30. So you will be having lunch with us. And we definitely have different topics that we address during that time. We have community members, community events that relate or don't relate to domestic violence that we would like to highlight. So if you would want or like to be a part of that, please reach out to me if you have an idea. We would love to have it. Next month, we are focusing on Women's History Month. And so if you would like to be featured, please let us know. And again, if you would like to become a member, you can also email me. I will place my email in the chat for you all. .org. Perfect. Okay. Well, let me check the. Okay, perfect. So it looks like she's waiting to be approved. So other than that, does anybody else have any questions or anything else that they might want to add that maybe I missed about what we do at the coalition? Oh, there we go.
There she is.
Hi, everyone. Hi, can you hear me?
Yay! Well,
Thank you for being here.
That was the craziest
Hello,
navigation.
Senator Lopez. Thank you. We already introduced you. There is someone else. There's another group who'll be waiting to get on shortly. But we wanted to. We said a lot of nice things about you before you got here. We'll tell you what they were at some point. So we just wanted to thank you for the support that you've given domestic violence for many, many years, and just have you say a few words about why this has mattered to you as an issue and what you think the people of New Mexico can do to really address the issue. Again, we don't have very much time, but we're so glad that you are here.
Yes, I am so sorry. I am so sorry for the delay in getting in. That was quite the navigation process. And I'm happy to be here. Wow, you asked me directly why this matters to me. Sometimes I share this, but it's not easy, as you know, because you work with survivors all the time. But obviously, well, for me, I am a survivor of domestic violence. I had a boyfriend early in my 20s who used to beat me, and I stayed with him for a while, and I didn't have any support at all. I didn't even tell my mother, and I remember calling. I was in law school and at UCLA, and I remember calling the police department after one really horrible incident, and he left. The boyfriend left through the back door, and the police showed up, and I was crying, and I was obviously had been through a bad situation. I had bruises, and they said, "Oh, your boyfriend's into whips and chains." And I was all of like, what, 19, 20 years old. And I said, what? I didn't even understand exactly what they're talking about. And then they said, well, if it happens again, you call us. And they were huge, huge men. That was back when they had a minimum height requirement in LAPD, which was racist, of they had to be 5'10" or over or older or over. And I remember that he said, just call us. We're into whips and trains too. And I just felt like I had no support at all. I felt like I couldn't tell my family. We were engaged to be married. I just felt like, what was I going to do? He was getting more and more dangerous. And so I left and I moved in with a girlfriend, and I found some community support and finally got out of this situation. But I know very well how hard it is to leave and the emotions and everything. And I remember, you know, I never really dealt with it. I never got counseling or anything. And something that she said was very powerful to me. She said, you have dealt with it. She said, all your life, you've been working on it by teaching courses at the law school on domestic violence, on, even though you don't share your experience usually, you're working through it intellectually and emotionally. And I think that that's absolutely right. And it's probably why I was so interested in becoming the executive director of Enlace Comunitario and working. And so I just want to thank every single one of you for your work on domestic violence. To me, it is just wrong to feel unsafe in your own home. And that's the bottom line. It is just the bottom line. And what you do every day in making sure that people can feel safe in their homes, can feel safe with their children, that is the most important thing you can do, because we also notice that violence in the home is replicated in the streets. And if you do the correlations of countries that have the highest rates of domestic violence, you will see that they also have the highest rates of violence in the community. And so what you're doing is transformative. And I am so grateful to each and every one of you. And my whole attitude toward your work is, if there is anything I can do to support you, I will. So right now, the bill that you are sponsoring is the lease bill, the bill that will help your clients get out of leases or kick the abuser off the lease, or otherwise remove a barrier to her choosing what she needs to do and helping her choose what she needs to do to deal with the situation. And I just want to end by saying I'm so grateful to you. I don't know if there are any questions. I actually am off. I took a bathroom break from the hearing. I just kind of stepped out. I don't know if why they think I stepped out, but I stepped out. So I do need to have to get back to the hearing. But if there's any questions, I'm happy to take like one or two.
We really want to just say thank you for all of your work over the years, Senator Sedillo Lopez, especially when it involves also personal storytelling. I think that's also transformative work, you know, and to have that be a part of what is there at our legislature when people are bringing personal stories around these issues to what influences, you know, these laws. That's exactly what our communities need. So thank you for your inspired work around all of these issues, and for always your commitment to community and to survivors and their families. So thank you.
And I would
thank you. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say the same thing. We are so grateful for you taking the time to be on this platform with us. It was difficult for all of us, but we are here. We made it, and it's just a learning curve, right? It's a new platform, but we're all excited to have this platform to really recognize our programs across the state of New Mexico and being our community heroes. And we're just really grateful for you to be here and really honored to have you.
Yes, thank you, Senator. You are
pleasure. I think part of the problem is I'm doing this on.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Yes, I was just going to say that that you are a real asset to our state, especially when it comes to domestic violence. You've worked hard and to make things better, and we know that you will continue to do that, and we appreciate everything you've done. And I don't know if there are any questions or if you have any final words, Senator, but we are again, thank you for being here, for sharing this time with us.
It looks like we do not have any questions at all on our chat or our Facebook page. But again, we are just so grateful to have you here, Senator.
Thank you for all your support.
Thank you. And I've got looking over at the hearing. So the hearing's on my computer.
Getting a nice little.
I've got to run. Bye. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Love you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you
Bye. Thank you.
so much for Senator.
Okay, now I can leave.
Lopez,
Okay, you can check in, but you can.
and thank you to Perfect. So thank you so much for Antoinette, Sedillo, Lopez for being on with us today. Again, thank you to Lieutenant Governor Howie Morales for taking the time as well to speak today in honoring our community heroes who are our programs, our 30 programs across the state of New Mexico. 20 of those are shelters. And so thank you again to the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce, the Santa Fe Chamber of Commerce, and of course the New Mexico Hospitality Association for having this platform and making it available for us to use and recognize this day as we would normally do in the Roundhouse. But this is totally fantastic that we had this available and you all made this available for us. Thank you for all of your work that you've done through this entire virtual Roundhouse. It's created an opportunity for organizations like ours to come on and recognize our programs or their organization or their business. And with that being said, we thank all of you for joining us and for chatting with us here. We are really grateful.
Thank you all so much for all of your information. As Kathy introduced you, it's a heavy topic, but it is so important. We're so happy to hear from the experts themselves and your entire team and all that you do for the entire state. So I invite everybody that is listening right now to thank our domestic violence team. And then also I encourage everyone to go to the sessions tab where we are hearing from a team and our cabinet secretaries about education. So that's going to be an interactive conversation. And I thank you all again. And we will meet back here on stage at 1:00 p.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.